think the state is just trying to be proactive in a very liberal way in terms of protecting both employer and private citizen rights.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Caveat, the CyberWire's privacy surveillance law and policy podcast. I'm Dave Bittner, and joining me is my co-host Ben Yellen from the University of Maryland Center for Health and Homeland Security. Hello, Ben.
Hello, Dave.
On today's show, Ben explains why the Elon Musk and Twitter dispute will be resolved by a special court in Delaware. I've got the story of Google updating their spam filters to please politicians. And later in the show, Brian Gant of Maryville University on how California's new privacy police could affect views on cybersecurity. While this show covers legal topics and Ben is a lawyer, the views expressed do not constitute legal advice. For official legal advice on any of the topics we cover, please contact your attorney. And now a few thoughts from our sponsors at KnowBe4. What do you do with risk? We hear that you can basically do three things. You can accept it, you can transfer it, or you can reduce it. And of course, you might wind up doing some mix of the three. But consider this. Risk comes in many forms, and it comes from many places, including places you don't necessarily control. Many an organization has been clobbered by something they wish they'd seen coming. So what can you do to see it coming? Later in the show, we'll hear some of KnowBe4's ideas on seeing into third-party risk. All right, Ben, we've got some interesting stories this week. Why don't you start things off for us here?
Sure. So my story concerns where and in which venue the Elon Musk Twitter dispute is going to be resolved. I realize that many people are not super interested in civil procedure, but I thought this is a good opportunity to explain why so many important cases involving large corporations are decided in the great state of Delaware.
So for those blink of us, and you miss it state.
Exactly. For those of us who are not from Delaware, and that's most of us, we know it by the tiny stretch of I-95 between the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. What I have discovered through my crack research this morning is that over 1.8 million companies are headquartered in Wilmington, Delaware. Now, if you've ever been to Wilmington, Delaware, it has a nice little downtown, minor league baseball stadium. There is no way that it is actually the physical headquarters of 1.8 million corporations. So why are all these companies headquartered there? The answer is because of these special courts. They are called the Chancery Courts of Delaware, and they are experts at resolving disputes among large corporations. These are specialty courts that are what are called courts in equity. So as opposed to a court of law, which resolves a dispute really within the confines of the letter of the law, a court in equity has a little bit more flexibility and can be a little bit more creative in its resolution. They also have close to maybe more than 400 years of experience in adjudicating disputes between companies. So they are familiar with precedent. They are familiar with the customary legal framework that involves these disputes. The reason companies decide to headquarter themselves in Delaware is that if they get sued, which every company has to be worried about getting sued, they want to be sued in Delaware court. And if you are a Delaware corporation, you can either be sued in the Delaware Chancery Court or you can ask to have the case removed to the Delaware Chancery Court, which will give your corporation more certainty. Lawyers who are experts in the subject know how to deal with the six members of this Chancery Court. They are expertise. They are experts in this area of the law. So I think a lot of people wonder why so many corporations are headquartered in Delaware. And I thought this Elon Musk Twitter dispute is the perfect opportunity to explain the nature of that kind of bizarre phenomenon.
Now, why has Delaware cornered the market on this? And what's in it for them as a state?
That is a great question. So what's in it for them as a state is they get all of the tax revenue that comes with 1.8 million corporations being headquartered in the state of Delaware. It means that they can have, I believe it's either no sales tax or an extremely low sales tax, because since corporations want to be headquartered there, even though the corporate tax rate is relatively low, just based on volume, they are collecting billions of dollars in tax revenue. So they can fund the things that make Delaware great, the beach service, the beach buses in Rehoboth Beach, and maybe the school districts if they're feeling nice, and if the kids in Delaware are lucky. But that's what's in it for Delaware. In terms of the history, I mean, it's really just an accident of history. Only 3 or 4 states in the country have these chancery courts, and it's just kind of become customary as our common law has developed over the past 400 years that these cases get heard specifically in Delaware. And now it's kind of just a niche part of the state. People who aren't involved in large corporate litigation just have no idea how important the state of Delaware is to our legal landscape. And the precedent that comes from the Delaware Chancery Court for some companies is more important than any precedent that they get from the Supreme Court, because they are so narrowly focused on corporate disputes in equity. So it has such incredibly strong precedential value.
This is, I have to admit, I'm pretty much completely ignorant when it comes to this. I mean, obviously I knew that, Delaware was, where all the credit card companies are and all that sort of thing. Everybody knows that. But
right.
So how does this play out in terms of, states' rights versus federal rights? I mean, you said in your explanation that you have these chancery courts versus courts of law. I guess I'd never considered that there was an alternative to courts of law. Do all the other states just kind of go along with this?
Well, yes. I mean, they are beholden to the holdings of the Chancery Court in Delaware because that's where these disputes are resolved. And not to get into the intricacies of civil procedure, but as a defendant, so if you're a defendant corporation, you're headquartered in Delaware, then the venue for that case based on personal jurisdiction is going to be the state of Delaware. But obviously, the tangible effect of that is that's a decision that's going to be applicable across the country. I think it's more just a matter of custom that in the corporate world, decisions of the Chancery Court in Delaware carry enough weight that it's not really a point of question or dispute that companies are going to follow the decisions of these courts. Once we decided that this was going to be the venue for these disputes, then I think all parties kind of recognize that whatever the Delaware Chancery Court says, that is the venue for making these decisions. And unless there's some type of really novel case that invokes federal constitutional issues, and most corporate disputes don't involve federal issues or constitutional issues, then there's no reason for any federal court, specifically the Supreme Court, to question the institutional expertise of this Chancery Court who's been doing this for 400 years. So I think it's just kind of a matter of custom. It's just bizarre. I mean, I imagine explaining it to somebody who landed on an alien spaceship that, this billion-dollar dispute, multi-billion-dollar dispute, which will decide whether Elon Musk has to pay $44 billion to Twitter to go through the purchase. Whether you think he actually ever intended to go through that purchase or not is a different question. That's always going to be resolved in this tiny state carved off the Atlantic coast in a tiny court in the small city of Dover, Delaware. It's just a kind of bizarre quirk of our system, but it's something that I think a lot of people kind of, as you said, that credit card companies are headquartered in Delaware, but people don't really know why businesses decide to be incorporated there. Sometimes they'll be incorporated in multiple states to kind of not put all their eggs in one basket. So if they get sued, they can try and decide the best venue for their purposes. But most corporations choose the Delaware venue because the Chancery Courts are seen as fair-minded. They are willing to look beyond the letter of the law to try and come up with creative solutions to complex problems. It's kind of like our own personal mediator. The Delaware Chancery Court is the nation's therapist / mediator for these large corporate disputes. So it's just a kind of a weird accident of history. But I thought, now that we're going to have probably one of the most widely tracked legal cases in the tech world, possibly ever, it's interesting to step back and do a background on why 6 people, one of 6 people in a funny uniform in the smallest geographical state or the second smallest geographical state will decide a dispute that's close to $50 billion. It's interesting,
Wow.
at least to me. I know some of you are probably bored by civil procedure, but I promise I'll only talk about this once.
Yeah, and I mean, do they find themselves slammed with cases just because there's so many companies there?
Yes, they are. So there's 6. There's a chief judge of the Chancery Court, and that person assigns each case to one of 6 other judges. They have a very large caseload. Not all corporate disputes make it into one of these courts, and not all disputes that ostensibly are going to be brought in front of the Chancery Court actually make it to adjudication. Sometimes they're settled out of court, or sometimes there's a motion for summary judgment where you get the judge to decide the merits of the case before there's actually a hearing on the record. So, yes, they have a large caseload, but so far it's been manageable. From what I can tell, I mean, there's no discussion about expanding the number of judges on this court. And I think they take their responsibility very seriously, and their workload reflects that responsibility.
I'm just imagining the Chancery Court of Delaware going up against the Supreme Court in some kind of softball league.
Yeah, it sounds like a great Disney movie that they made for adults, where it's the ultimate David versus Goliath, the Delaware Chancery Court and the Supreme Court. Yeah, given the gerontocracy of the Supreme Court, I'm not sure that the Delaware Chancery Court would fare so poorly in a softball game.
Right.
Not knowing
That's how
anything
we decide
about
the big issues.
Yeah, not that I know anything about the physical capabilities or really even the age breakdown of the judges on the Delaware Chancery Court. But yeah, that would be fun to see that happen.
All right. Well, it's an interesting little bit of background there.
Hopefully this is a very special episode for those of our listeners from the great state of Delaware.
No, it's good. It's good. I'm planning on vacationing in Delaware later this summer. So as you said, they have lovely beaches, and people there are very nice. And also tax-free liquor stores. So there you go.
And believe it or not, I am also going to be vacationing in Delaware, and we were not paid to say this. So they really do have great beaches. And yeah, really tax-free liquor. You can't beat that.
No. All right. Well, we will have a link to a story from the New York Times on this topic, covering the Elon Musk Twitter debacle. Can I call it a debacle?
Yeah, we can definitely call it a debacle. That might be too moderate of a word to describe what's going on.
All right. Well, it's a family show, so we'll leave it there. My story this week comes from Bloomberg. This is an article written by Max Chafkin. And it's titled, "Google is going to let politicians spam your inbox." Ben, I have to say, something that really grinds my gears is that politicians always carve themselves out of everything, right? Like the do not call list except for politicians, right?
We make the rules. Yeah, the rules don't apply to us. Yep.
Right. I think there ought to be a law, Ben. There ought to be let's call a constitutional convention. We need to fix this.
Yeah, that's what we have to do, because it's not like the lawmakers are ever going to do it for us. So, yeah.
Right. So this article is about Google's parent company, Alphabet, which evidently is trying to get ahead of potential legislation that's coming along. That could affect how they run their spam filters. And evidently, Google has been accused through their Gmail product of disproportionately filtering right-wing political speech or political, I guess, ads, promotions, whatever you want to call it.
Messaging, I guess, yeah.
Emails, yeah. Disproportionately placing those into spam filters. That right-wing stuff ends up in spam filters more than left-wing stuff. First of all, I guess I was skeptical about that when I first heard it, because it is a common, cry in social media circles, certainly, for right-wing folks to say that they're being censored and so on, but the facts don't align with that.
Right.
But in this case, they actually do. There is a study that they reference in this article that shows that, sure enough, Gmail does filter more right-wing stuff to the spam folder than it does left-wing stuff. And interestingly, some of the other email providers, I believe they reference Outlook and Yahoo Mail, do the opposite.
Interesting.
Which is interesting. They speculate that may be because Gmail in general has a younger user base than Outlook and Yahoo do. And so if their users are telling them this is spam, this is spam, this is spam, that the younger users may have more of a liberal bias than the older ones would. And so their algorithms are being fed this information that says, hey, this is spam, and that right-wing messages might be getting that more than left-wing for the younger users.
You and I spend much of our day marking this is spam on political fundraising emails. At least I do. I'll speak for myself.
Okay. Well, I find that this stuff, I see very little spam. And I have to credit a friend of mine who goes by the name Ray Redacted on Twitter, well-known information security guy. He unlocked a little secret trick for me, and that is create a folder in your email account that filters for the word unsubscribe.
Funny story about that. I saw the same life hack. I did that. Then one time I was supposed to make plans with my in-laws, and there was a whole Facebook message exchange that I was not privy to, because there was the word unsubscribed was mentioned somewhere in that email exchange. So just a little warning shot, but generally that is a very strong practice.
Yes. Well, with great power comes great responsibility. So use that at your own risk. But I've found that it really helps clear out my inbox, and then I just have to take the time to visit it every now and then, or clear it out, or whatever. So. But what's interesting, so getting back to this article, it seems as though there is some legislation that this article says really has no chance of passing, some bipartisan legislation, but that Google is sort of trying to get ahead of this, thinking that should Republicans take control of Congress, that they may come after them more aggressively once they have that power. And so Google is basically saying during political season, we're going to dial back the amount of spam filtering we do with political messaging. What do you make of this, Ben?
So a couple of important things to note here. The first is the market share. Google has 1.5 billion monthly users. That's a rather large proportion of people on planet Earth. So I think this policy carries extra weight just because of so many of us use Gmail as an email platform. The other thing is, I think from a 30,000-foot perspective, all political fundraising emails, in my mind these days, are very spammy. I mean, it's, Ben, I need your help to defeat so-and-so, chip in an extra $5 or $10 today, and you will get a special red carpet status to the next such and such rally. I don't know why conservative messages are more prone to get caught up in the spam filter. My educated guess is that a lot of the conservative ecosystem revolves around President Trump and his fundraising organization, and they have a lot of promotions that strike me as kind of scammy, like be part of the Super MAGA Patriot Club, be like a Diamond Gold member, and you'll win a all expenses paid trip to have dinner with Donald Trump Jr. in Las Vegas or whatever.
Right.
In a world where so many emails qualify as spam, maybe that's something that distinguishes itself in terms of whatever algorithm Gmail uses to categorize something as spam. The other solution, which I think is maybe a little bit more innocuous, is the one that you presented, which with a younger base of users, people are just declaring more Republican, conservative fundraising emails as spam, and Google starts to learn to put those in the spam folder. Mm-hmm. What's weird about this entire story to me is that Google is purposefully making the user experience worse, in my view, to head off a potential political dispute. And I understand it from their perspective. Republicans are very likely to gain control of Congress, and Google does not want to be regulated by the federal government through Congress. But by doing this, I mean, I would guess that maybe 95% of users would prefer to have more political fundraising emails qualify as spam rather than fewer. So it's just, to me, kind of a bizarre situation we're in where trying to head off a political controversy supersedes the interests of the 1.7 billion people who use the platform. It just kind of makes the whole thing a little bit curious.
Yeah. It's just yucky. And the whole thing's just yucky, and it gets back to what I said at the outset. This is, in a way, the politicians, carving stuff out for themselves. In this case, it's the politicians, complaining, using their threat of implementing regulation on Google as a way to get their messaging through.
Yeah, I mean, in that perspective, it's kind of corrupt. The fact that, it's really only protecting the very narrow interests of politicians and political fundraisers. And they are getting their way from a policy perspective against what I guess, I don't have hard data on this, but I would guess is the preference of the vast majority of users who would rather get no fundraising emails. I mean, even threatening to have this carve out for themselves, it is really Congress removing them, kind of inserting themselves into the arena to assert their own interests against the interests of the vast majority of consumers. Now, Google, does not have to go along with this. And I think the fact that they are says volumes about how worried they are about being regulated, and that they are still, to a rather large extent, beholden to the whims of politicians. They really worry about what politicians are going to do and say to them. And that creates this kind of power dynamic that is generally not advantageous for people like you and me. Yeah.
Well, we are hot and heavy into, some of my friends call it silly season, election season, here in our locality. I was driving by one of the schools recently, and the entrance to the school, which is where we have our elections, was just covered with political signs, just comically so.
Oh, yeah. And I get phone calls from, this is so-and-so from such and such committee. It gets overwhelming.
I wish there were a spam filter for sign waivers.
Oh, my God.
A real-world spam filter for sign waivers. Because I think they're dangerous.
Just have them blotted out. Have your glasses blot them out when they're standing at the side of the road. Yeah.
Right. Maybe if we get, when we get our augmented reality glasses, they'll be able to automatically paint out, sign waivers in real time.
Now there's a $1 million idea. Exactly. That's what I was going to say.
Get on that.
Don't get too big for this little podcast, because you might make millions.
There you go. All right. Well, we will have links to all of our stories in the show notes. And of course, we would love to hear from you. If you have a story that you would like us to consider for the show, you can email us. It's caveat@thecyberwire.com. So let's return to our sponsor, KnowBefore's question. How can you see risk coming, especially when that risk comes from third parties? After all, it's not your risk until it is. Here's step 1. Know what those third parties are up to. KnowBefore has a full GRC platform that helps you do just that. It's called KCM, and its vendor risk management module gives you the insight into your suppliers that you need to be able to assess and manage the risks they might carry with them into your organization. With KnowBefore's KCM, you can vet, manage, and monitor your third-party vendors' security risk requirements. You'll not only be able to pre-qualify the risk, you'll be able to keep track of that risk as your business relationship evolves. KnowBefore's standard templates are easy to use, and they give you a consistent, equitable way of understanding risk across your entire supply chain. And as always, you'll get this in an effective automated platform that you'll see in a single pane of glass. You'll manage risk twice as fast at half the cost. Go to kb4.com/KCM and check out their innovative GRC platform. That's kb4.com/KCM. Request a demo and see how you can get audits done at half the cost in half the time. And we thank KnowBefore for sponsoring our show. Ben, I recently had the pleasure of speaking with Brian Gant. He is from Maryville University. And we were talking about how some of California's privacy regulations could affect views on cybersecurity. Here's my conversation with Dr. Brian Gant.
California seems to always kind of be the leader in terms of going after certain rights to protect households or data or privacy. We had the investigation with the iPhone. I forget what year it was, and between Apple and whether or not privacy was being invoked, about going through the lock code and getting into that phone. I think that just kind of steamrolled into where they wanted to create this protection law, the CCPA, to basically protect the data privacy of individuals and basically talk about how they don't have to necessarily share their information within their household with a particular consumer. I think from a law enforcement perspective, we always look at exigent circumstances and whether or not, information, private information will help out the public or help out in terms of stopping loss of life or things of that nature. But I think the state is just trying to be proactive in a very liberal way in terms of protecting both employer and private citizen rights.
Well, let's talk about the Privacy Protection Agency itself. I mean, what is your understanding of what this agency's charge is? What are they responsible for doing?
My understanding is that they're responsible just from a governance perspective to make sure individuals are not being abused, whether that be from an employer standpoint or from a criminal justice law enforcement standpoint as well.
And to what degree will their reach extend beyond California's borders?
That I'm not aware of. And to be quite honest, I don't believe their reach can extend beyond their borders. I'm not privy to, I haven't read in detail, the breakdown of their constitution or bylaws, but, as a state entity, I'm pretty sure that they have to stay within the boundaries of the California.
And in terms of, for consumers within California itself, what sort of privacy enhancements could they expect here? I mean, what sort of things could they come to the agency to assist them with?
Privacy laws affect so many different avenues, right? Anything dealing with marketing, sales, purchasing, anything dealing with security or information technology, all of those things kind of fall within the umbrella of privacy and big data. So a consumer, if they truly had a concern that this particular Privacy Act was violated, all of those things kind of fall within that jurisdiction.
You mentioned that California really tends to take the lead on these sorts of things. Do you expect that this is something we're going to see rolling across the nation, state by state, or with the federal government not really being able to get much done? Do you expect that this is something we'll see spreading across the nation?
I do expect a few other states kind of to follow suit. I think they're kind of giving California a little leeway to see how things kind of play out. But, typically states like Washington, some of your northeastern states, and also maybe some of your Midwestern states like Illinois, typically kind of follow lock and step with California and some of their laws. So I can definitely see this expanding out a little bit, with, of course, little tweaks here and there for your own prospective state.
Has there been much pushback on this? I mean, California overall, I think, as you mentioned, tends to lead in sort of a liberal way, but I could imagine criticism from folks who might see this as being a bit of an overreach, pro-business people who, don't want to have too many regulations.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I think, that's why I said I don't necessarily think this will be something that catches fire, and that a lot of the majority of the states will be adopting. You have some states who are very, very conservative. Some states who are very, very pro law enforcement. We have a lot of the events, some of the tragic events that are happening around us right now, and they can speak to specific use cases where private data on a particular individual has helped intimately with a particular case, as an example, and showing how looking at somebody's online footprint, as an example, has allowed someone to forecast something that could have possibly tragically happened. Whether it be domestic terrorism or what have you. And so, it's a gray area. Obviously, California has chose to err on the side of the private citizen, which is not surprising at all.
I'm curious from your point of view as a professor, as you're working with your students. What part does privacy play in the lessons that you're teaching them about cybersecurity, computer science, all those kinds of things? What place does it take?
Privacy plays a big role, and I use privacy in a variety of different settings, whether it's talking about cyber or criminal law, or whether it's talking about mobile security, things of that nature. And I try to explain to them that there is no one answer to how you should view privacy. Privacy is a personal thing. Now, what you do have to think about and what you do have to discuss is, if you work for a private organization, you have to decide on whether or not just where the line is drawn with your privacy. If that organization issues you a BYOD, a take-home cell phone device, and instead of using your own personal device, you have to be okay with that. All right. Or if you want to use your personal device for, work, email, and things of that nature, you have to be okay with that. Is it supposed to be segmented off? Yes, it's supposed to be. Can things happen to where maybe some data accidentally spills over into a section of the phone, which is controlled by the corporation? Absolutely. And so these are things that you have to consider before you make those decisions to sign on the dotted line, whether it be for a federal agency or private organization. And you have to be okay with that.
And in your experience, I mean, thinking of your students, the college age generation who's coming up today, in your experience, what is their attitude towards privacy? And does it differ from, older folks like me?
Dave, it's kind of surprising. I think one would think that a student in this day and age would be all for privacy, right? All for privacy, all for Big Brother not overreaching and not overlooking. But surprisingly, most of my students are very practical in understanding the way things are these days. They're very realistic in understanding that even when you say your Instagram is in private mode, once you put your information on the internet, there is no such thing as privacy, right? Cell phones, third-party adware. When you discuss going to Home Depot, talking to your mother, and all of a sudden ads start popping up on your phone when you get off. All of these things try to emulate behavior and buying patterns, and it's all around us. And so I think they're very, very, they have a very, very practical sense about it, more so than what you probably would think.
Are you optimistic, for our future here as you think about some of the things that are being put in place? We have, California putting this agency in place and you're working with your students every day. Do you feel as though we're heading in the right direction?
I do. I do feel as though there are enough agencies and groups out there to where, we won't, and I'll show my age here, we won't turn into the movie Enemy of the State, right? We won't have overarching satellites watching every move that we do, and we will have, some form of privacy. But we also are embracing, of technology and efficiency and doing things in a manner that will help us out, as we move forward in so many different industries and so many different veins. And so I'm hopeful that we can keep a steady pace and not necessarily alienate the trust of citizens to where you get to the point where technology is viewed as the big bad wolf instead of something that is here to assist and help out.
Ben, what do you think?
Really interesting conversation. I mean, the most important question that you ask is this something that's going to filter into other states? As he mentioned, California is always kind of the leader in these types of efforts, whether it's CCPA itself or whether it's the kind of tech police that he's referencing in this interview. And sometimes that does filter down to other states. Oftentimes it doesn't. I think there's something unique about California's political culture, the way its legislature works, and the way all these companies are Silicon Valley companies that makes California unique. And I just don't think there's going to be a desire in many other states to have this type of oversight body, just because I think it could be an invasion on individual liberties, even an ostensible effort to protect personal privacy. And also, it might eliminate some of the conveniences that people say they don't like about the internet or online interactions, but that they actually like and value.
Yeah. All right. Well, again, our thanks to Dr. Brian Gant. He is from Maryville University. We do appreciate him taking the time. We want to thank this week's sponsor, KnowBe4. If you go to kb4.com/KCM, you can check out their innovative GRC platform. That's kb4.com/KCM. Request a demo and see how you can get audits done at half the cost in half the time. That is our show. We want to thank all of you for listening. The Caveat podcast is proudly produced in Maryland at the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our senior producer is Jennifer Iben. Our executive editor is Peter Kilpie. I'm Dave Bittner.
And I'm Ben Yellen.
Thanks for listening.